Okay, this is an episode that I've been really looking forward to. It's only been a week since we suggested it, and we managed to get it done really quickly. And it's with a really good friend of mine, who I'll get you to introduce himself in a minute. But there's a real special message that we want to convey from John today, and spread the word about what he's doing for a really, really good cause that we're both him more than me, but both can relate to massively. So, John, thank you very much, mate, for being with me this morning and spending your time, mate. Over to you.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers, mate. As with every person I have on, mate, I ask them to give us a bit of a background, a bit of a bio. Obviously, not for me because I know you, but for those that are watching. So, over to you, buddy.
So my name is John Serracasano. I'm an Army veteran. I served in the Royal Engineers and later the Army Physical Training Corps, and I left about 4 years ago now to pursue being a science teacher. I did just over 15 years by the time I left, so I was pretty well institutionalised, maybe a little bit more than I considered that I would be. And I managed to get my degree while I was serving. I left. As I was leaving, I was accepted to University of Cambridge for a PGCE in biology, which was amazing. I've stayed on with Cambridge to do a Master's in Education Leadership School Improvement, which I've just finished last year. I've had some great jobs as a science teacher, but in my current role, I'm assistant principal of a really large secondary school, which I love, and my roles include behaviour and attendance, which I knowing my background from the military and obviously with the physical training corps coming from a rehab side and that the whole ERI specialism, it just fitted together like just a giant jigsaw just coming together nicely. So I feel really fortunate to be in the job of my dreams, as it were. But as Ash has alluded to, we're in a time of global pandemic. So whereas I get to have these conversations with the pupils at school every day, my concern is now shifted towards, well, what's happening with these pupils behind the screens now we've moved to remote learning. And so the biggest concern I've had since the first lockdown has been around inactivity and the inactivity of the pupils in not just my community, but around the United Kingdom.
Mate, awesome. And I want to come back to the behaviour and linking that into performance, especially within young adults as you're dealing with now, because it's some context that I've got no idea about. I've never had to do what you're doing right now, and can only commend you having had to homeschool my little one for a little while. Teaching is an art. But before we go on to that, I want you to tell the story that you told me of what led you, or first of all, to say what the challenge is, but then the story behind it. I think there's so much emotion there, and such a small world that we live in. If you can share that, please, mate.
Yeah, so I'm doing a challenge at the moment where it's 1,000 press-ups, but during the school day. So in my mind, I see it as the teachers start at 8:30. They've got a full day of lessons. While those lessons are going on, I'm doing 3 press-ups every minute for the duration of the school day, just to promote activity in inactive pupils. And I'm getting anecdotal feedback from pupils, from families, from people within the school that I work in, that there is high levels of inactivity and a big impact on mental health as well. So, I mean, we know we're experts in this field as well. We know that it's one element. Activity is one element, but it's for me, it's the most important element because it so much comes into it when you start making those decisions to have a more healthier lifestyle. I'm doing the challenge for a charity called Scotty's Little Soldiers, which is a charity that's very close to my heart because I started a Year 7 science lesson in September. And as I'm getting to know the class, they're talking a bit about me, and as you start to build that rapport with the pupils, they start picking bits about the military. And a girl in the class raised her hand and said, I'm wondering if you know my dad who'd served. And she said his name, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, because I still remember the day we found out that he was killed in Afghanistan. And he was with I was with the 1st Royal Tank Regiment. He was with 2 RTR, 2nd Royal Tank Regiment, and obviously I started looking into Scotty's Little Soldiers as the fallout from that. And this is a charity that is there for the children of servicemen that we've lost, and it's something now that I hold very dear, and I'll never, like I said, you get out of army mode. It's nice, useful little anecdote to build rapport with classes and pupils, but something like that hit you straight in the face like a ton of bricks. It's big, and so I'm thinking, like, for my children, like, how active are kids, how active are they? I want to make sure that this is a message that is going out to the wider the country, and it seems to be getting a bit of traction, which is nice. It's going well.
It's good, and hopefully we can share it a bit more across all the platforms today after this, and get some more veteran support behind your cause as well. We need to share that amongst the community, and it's a massive community that we automatically belong to now. So we need to share that. But it's an amazing story, and it's just shows such a small world that we live in, that this young girl is now in your science class. And the link back to Scotty's Little Soldiers, the charity.
Because I didn't make it clear, I knew her dad as well, so he's from the area, hence how she could end up in in my classroom, and we knew each other from way back when, and would share a pint together at the weekends when we'd do that inevitable drive back from camp, as everybody did back then when we're young and carefree. So it's very important to me, and I get to do it whilst I'm at a school, and whilst for a cause that I feel very fortunate to be in that position as a veteran as well, knowing the struggles that veterans have in sort of finding their way. Because one thing that goes along with that is that I had no idea how institutionalized I was. I think I was naive enough to think that I hadn't been in long enough to be institutionalized, but I completely was. So there's just those wider links into like the resettlement and the mental health around just figuring out your identity once you've left that overarching community. And as I'm sure you'll attain to, it's one of those ones where you realize who's really important to you from that community you leave behind. You keep in touch with those that are the most important, and it's and you help each other through difficult times. It's fantastic.
Absolutely, and that's one of the major benefits of the community, isn't it? We're being through stuff together that not a lot of people can relate to unless they've been through it themselves, and then that stays with you for life, and it's amazing. So cool. That's the challenge. I'll share all the links in the bio for the YouTube episode, and again across all the social media, and we'll sort of try and hopefully generate more traction and more support for you, and raise some more money for an amazing cause. Mate, appreciate you sharing that. Let's segue back into the behaviour, and I'm really interested, obviously, because behaviour is part of your role. What, if any, skill sets did you bring from your experience in the military and then now applying within your school environments?
That's a really good question, and it's interesting because the perceptions of what people would consider as behaviour within the military and how it would fit into the school environment, I think there'd be a pretty incorrect idea of what it would be. Now, I've worked in zero tolerance schools, and these are zero tolerance schools in rural communities, which is a catastrophic failure, because if you think that you can have zero tolerance to behaviour without understanding the nuance around individual pupils and their circumstances, you're never going to win over a rural community. Now, this, not to bore you with education policy, is a fallout from London and policies that have been successful in London and schools that have been successful in London. And one thing that we've seen over education policy is its unsuccessful implementation to different cities and different communities, because what works in London, the paradox of London, as I would term it, is not necessarily what would work anywhere else. So whereas my skill set from the army helped me, is that we're used to having, whether it be abroad or whether it just be around like our squadrons and platoons, that we're used to have like conversations, and how I term it as restorative conversations. You will not get people to follow your instruction. If you're barking and screaming and shouting at them, they will be quick enough to stand up to you and kick back against it if you are like that. You've got to be emotionally intelligent. You've got to understand the community that you're in, and from the army, you've got to understand the people that you're talking to. I remember a time when there was a massive kickback against instructors in the army who hadn't been on operational tours because they were barking at young corporals who'd just come back from 6 months tours with no understanding of what they were being through. And that little lessons like that from the army stayed with me, because you've got to understand who you're talking to and the challenges that they've had to be able to impact in their behaviour in the slightest. So we have what is termed as a restorative behaviour system. We take, to a certain degree, individual serious breaches of behaviour on its individual merits. We need to understand the background. We need to link in with the carers or the parents of those children, and we have that ability to link, to make those links, and then to close that behaviour loop with the teachers as well. So there's, at the heart of it is conversations between the teachers and parents, and the myself as assistant principal for behaviour with parents as well, and making sure that we've got an understanding between the parents and the school that behaviours need to be sanctioned. The school is doing some sort of a sanction. They're always more powerful if those sanctions are supported by the home as well. So a good one's always removal of mobile phones or Xbox controllers, or something along those lines, where the children know that when they come to school, if they aren't behaving correctly, then the school and the home will work together to ensure that the disruption to everybody's education is kept as little as possible. And I'm very grateful to be at a school that really supports that restorative system, because we don't live in these cities with tower blocks surrounding the school where we can have that ability to get the parents in and to send kids home and keep them out for having the wrong colour socks on or something like that. It's a lot of work, but it's very worthwhile.
It sounds like it's the right thing to do as well, because you and I both know every person is an individual, has their own unique background and history that shape their behaviours and then shapes their attitudes and their actions. And so if you have this blanket treatment, we've been through it, of carrot and stick sort of mentality, it doesn't work. It can work in certain situations, but it's not optimum. And if you have the ability to treat everyone as an individual and understand and be aware of their individuality, then you can tailor and bespoke the response that they need that will get the best out of them. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
That's exactly what it's like. It's making the individual understand the impact of their behaviours. It links into something that's really stood in my mind. Where at a previous school, I had a parent in for a meeting to discuss their child's behaviour, and he was literally shouting. The parent was literally shouting in my face, "Why can't you control my child? Why can't you control my child?" It's like, this isn't a prison. This is a place of education. Like, we're having these meetings to discuss this. And the parents were, "I think you should bring back the cane." Like, bring back the cane? It's like, how is that a solution? It's like, could you even imagine the sort of people it would bring to education if people knew that they had the ability to inflict harm on children? It'd be, to think that even goes on in people's head. But I never would have got to understand the child and the family and that without this conversation. And it's things like that. It's days like that. It's meetings like that I love so much about the job, because you get to understand the world, the community, in such a different light, away from your own experiences, which can very easily sort of narrow your worldview. And this parent obviously had this in their head that it was something we should be doing. So to have that open conversation, to be able to take his ideas of what education and behaviour within schools is, and to give him the reasons why we're approaching it this way, is really rewarding as well. So Yeah.
Good. And the story makes me laugh because it's, again, I don't know the parent, I don't know the situation, but children mimic. That's how they learn, especially at a younger age. They copy the environment that they're surrounded by because
Mm.
people that they know. And often, in crossing leadership, is a big thing that we harp on about is values-based leadership. You are your actions, and people will mimic those actions because they're deemed to be acceptable. And so if the parent is screaming and shouting at you, and in a different situation, the child has seen that as an appropriate action, then of course they're going to mimic it. And then obviously
Absolutely.
you end up in the situation that you're in.
And it's no wonder why we end up with children getting into fights or dealing with situations a certain way, because they're mirroring the behaviour from what they know from home. So we've got to sort of understand it. Once we understand it, we can sort of break it down. We can make children understand the impact that their decisions are having on other people. You imagine that parents would, in another conversation, would bring out the line of, "Oh, my parents used to smack me and it never did me any harm," that type of thing. It's like, because we've learned this knowledge through incremental progressions. It's important that we don't regress back into a state just because we perceive it works better back then. I don't believe there's ever been a time when any generation has thought that the current children have not been sort of lazy and over privileged. It's you go back to sort of ancient Greece, and I'm sure they're having those same conversations there about how useless the children are and how they're never going to amount to anything because they didn't have it as hard as the guys that built the Colosseum or whatever else. But, yeah.
Again, we can relate to this firsthand, isn't it? It's an old military adage, isn't it, that the generation above you always had it harder, and those below you will never have it as hard as you, which is absolute rubbish. They're just different circumstances and different environments.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something that we can definitely relate to. Cool. And it's nice to see, it's refreshing to hear that you're taking that approach of understanding. You mentioned it, worldviews, because again, we come from relatively privileged backgrounds, both you and I, and we can't let that affect our perspective on other people's upbringing, which can be dangerous because you have expectations then of, well, why aren't you behaving the same way as me? Unless you know or understand and can relate to them as individuals, then you'll never be in a position to help them, which is, again, comes back to the understanding of individuality. So I commend it.
I mean, to your listeners of the podcast, I would say that no matter how bad they envision how bad some children have it in the UK, I would guarantee is nowhere near as bad as it's much worse than they believed, because just by virtue that they're the sort of person that would listen to this sort of a podcast, would, in my head, put them in the sort of category that maybe has had a slightly different upbringing, and we want to try and make this sort of conversation as wide as possible. But some of the levels of deprivation, some of the levels of difficulties that the children have had to put up with around the country for very long periods now, being literally locked in their houses, their bedrooms become a prison cell, and it's the challenge is not just going to be where they are educationally, it's where they are as a human being, how they've grown, and what sort of we need to work on over the coming years. And the most frustrating thing for me is for the younger children in the school, we've got time to be able to do that. For the 11s, by this summer, they're gone. And just trying to do as much as we can in this short period of time to get these values that we hold dear to us. For us, it's second nature. We might not even consider how we utilize people around us to talk to about our feelings and our troubles, to open up. We're used to doing that in the platoons. We're used to have a good sergeant major encouraging us to do that. We're used to having that band of brothers bond with each other. These kids might not have that. We're used to having routine. We take for granted setting alarms and getting up, and that comfort that you get from that battle rhythm each day. But I had a period one lesson this morning, and 5 minutes gone, a couple more joining in, 10 minutes. I know full well that they're like wiping sleep off their eyes, but at least they're there. Like, I'm not going to chastise them for being late. That's the least of my concerns. I mean, they're there, and I'm so grateful they're there. I just would love them to be in a position where they would just set an alarm, not snooze it, get up, get a bit of fresh air, and just empower them to take individual responsibility. There's a narrative. I might add as well, I teach A-level sociology now as well, off the back of being a science teacher. The masters gave me a sociological base, and it's my favourite part of my teaching. And we look at society as bound these different groups. We base our sociological discussions around group X and group Y, but I really want to pull it back to the individual, the scientist, the science teacher in me. Sorry, it's about, well, what can the individual do? What we want to take individuals on their merit. I want them to be taking responsibility for themselves, and yes, get comfort from a group, absolutely, but take responsibility for yourself. That's a real message I want to get out to the classes and the pupils, absolutely, that they are in charge of their own destiny.
And I think the younger that you can get that across, I deal with professional adults now, where we're having this conversation, senior leaders in big organizations, and it's, they have, there's no accountability with all my people, and okay, in the trying to empower them, but empowerment and accountability, it's a marriage. You can't have one without the other. Especially in business, there has to be a level of accountability. And so, I think it's something that I don't think I got through my education. It was probably beaten into me during my military service. But, again, we come from that privileged background of having that. But if you can get young adults to think about that and to take ownership of their lives at such an early age, especially in the world that we live in now, where there's endless opportunity, that there's, COVID aside, obviously, in the boundaries that's put around us, but the globe has shrunk since the dawn of the internet, and everything is available to everyone within reason. Obviously, I'm not broad brushing that, or I am broad brushing that. Sorry, but accountability and empowerment, so powerful skills to learn as a youngster and as a young adult, and take it to apply. Brilliant.
I really struggle to see effective sort of critical friendship, as it were, especially from like a performance management perspective, because people are they find taking criticism so badly. It's like, you don't mean it as criticism. Like, you can't, for a performance management review, say everything's perfect when it's not, and it doesn't mean that necessarily it's negative. Like, critical, like I ask for critical friendships. I want people to break down what I'm doing and saying, this is working well, this isn't. It's like, right, what's not working well? But there's so little stomach for any sort of perceived criticism. And I find that really abhorrent, because you're not going to grow just from being patted on the back, being told everything you're doing is hunky-dory, and even just getting kids to try things and try new things and be happy to give something a go that hasn't worked out and fail and learn from it. I know it seems like it's the sort of narrative that's been sort of regurgitated from time to time, but it's still so important. Like, there's nothing wrong with trying something and failing it. Like, at least you tried. I've got less time for the person that hasn't even bothered in the slightest. The earlier we can instill those values, the better. Just plant those little seeds, just have them growing in their head over time. And I've done assemblies for every year group this week, and one thing that it's really showed me is that the importance of the PE department within school, because PE and physical education has moved on so much since we were at school. I was so critical of the elitist PE that I had. It was all about sport. Actually, it wasn't even all about sport. It was all about football, and I didn't even care for football, really. And it was horrific. The irony that I ended up in the physical training corps has never been lost on me. But the amazing work that the PE departments are doing during this sort of lockdown, of just really encouraging physical activity and exercise with pupils, is just commendable. And that's for every school around the country. And because that's one department that's definitely, you wouldn't even recognise it from your time at school. They've gone
Absolutely.
a long way, very inclusive,
Mm-hmm.
exercise for all, figuring out what works for each person and just go with it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I see it in the primary school for my little one now. It's leaps and bounds for, there was no PE, I don't think, in my school as a primary school. Anyway, just go out and play
It's football.
and that's it.
Yeah.
All around for a couple of hours, and that's you.
Yeah.
You know, the PE teacher just stood there in his corduroys and his his patched jackets, and that was it. So yeah, we've definitely moved on, and I think there are positives out of the pandemic. That we can look to and see, and I physically see it out now. Personally, as a family, we are more active now than we ever used to be as a collective, just going out for walking, because that's the only thing we can do. There is literally nothing to do at the moment in the lockdown in the UK, and you see so much more people out and about. So I think the onus on health, obviously, because it's a pandemic, everyone's thinking about health and hygiene. But because activity, going out for a walk, is the only thing that you can do right now, I think hopefully I'm optimistic that this is hopefully going to change society for the better long term, but we will see.
Yeah, it's a conversation that's not had enough. Like, there's so much discussion about what the government can do for you, what the government can do to make sure you get the vaccine quicker. It's like, no, what can you do for you? Like, do we need to even discuss the amount of evidence around health and well-being with maintaining a healthy immune system? Like, that's a non-starter, surely, that you're just like, yes, we're in lockdown, but it's not an excuse to become like an alcoholic. Like, the amount of alcohol being sold at the minute is sky high. Well, that's not you taking individual responsibility for yourself. Like, by all means, have a treat, but goodness grief, like, take some responsibility for yourself. Don't just put it all on mass government to vaccinate you. Like, you can make your immune system very, very strong.
Absolutely. And again, it comes back to our previous point, doesn't it, of ownership and accountability. It's like, you own your life. The government can restrict you or lower those restrictions as much as you can. You can do the best that you can with the opportunity, but only you can control that, as an individual or as a family. And again, what I think is nice, I'm not doing any research into it, but this has leveled the playing field for inequality, which it's rife in the UK, because every single person, regardless of background or ability, can get outside of the house and go for a walk or a stroll or whatever that may be, do some outdoor activity, because you don't need to pay for it.
Yeah, I do feel for those in the cities. I can say that with a smile, knowing I've got the countryside behind me that I can walk around. But people stuck in blocks in London, I do feel for them. And
absolutely, but you can still walk outside of that block. You don't have to
absolutely.
that building. I get that, obviously, and again, it's just a thought that popped into my head. But there's no excuse, really. Finance.
The bit that I've been sort of latching onto, sorry, with regards to like activity, I grasp onto the mastering of the body weight type things. Like, I remember what it's like to have the basics of gymnastics, sort of, and those values rammed down our throats, and they're very important to me. Like, I have the discussions with sort of 12, 13, 14-year-olds all the time, like, earn your place in the gym when you're old enough to have a gym membership. Master your body weight. If you can't do press-ups, and if you can't do pull-ups, and if you can't do squats with your own body weight, then what's the point in trying to move some iron around? Like the basics of gymnastics hold firm. They're like, and it's you get those values in you, and they don't go away. It's something that I think our generation will benefit a lot more of, because I'd still begrudge the army for having the rule where you sort of hit 40 and that's you're done. You've got you've done your 22 years and that's you finished, and that's disgraceful. It's like, at 40, I'm just starting. Like, physically, I'm definitely on par with what I was in my 30s. There's no concern about that. And it's like, to think that a service is done with you by that age, that's a horrible message to send to people. It's disgraceful. I don't think I could ever forgive them for putting that into our heads, and that's something I'm trying to unlearn sort of every day. you keep training, you keep fit, you keep active, and nobody has a clue how old you are. You can't guess if you're. I can't remember who says it, but it's like if you're 65-year-old and you start going to the gym, you look like a 65-year-old in the gym. If you could be training your entire life,
yeah,
no one has a clue how old you are. You're doing the right thing. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right, mate. Cool. Well, I'm going to end it off there, mate. I think we've explored a hell of a lot there, and I really value your contribution. And again, just want to finish off on sort of raising the challenge as well. It's 1,000 press ups, 3 every minute for 6 hours. That's right. And
6.5 hours. 6.5 hours. I'm going to go for the full school day. If I hit my, I'm going to put it out here first. If I hit my funding goal, and I'm going to up it a little bit on Saturday. I've got a 4-hour session on Saturday. I'm considering altering the challenge, making it a bit harder. We'll see how this Saturday goes, but and I'll take that as a bite at a time. But yeah, I'm so grateful for how it's all sort of gone so far. It's amazing, and it's for an amazing charity as well.
Yeah, no, it is, mate. And hands off to you for doing it. Really can only commend you, mate. And I know you anyway, and I wouldn't expect anything less from you and you, the way you are. So massive applause to you, mate, for doing it. It's within your realms, and you can spread the good word and raise some good money for a good charity. So good on you, mate. Well done. Cool, mate. John, thanks very much for your time, mate. I will put all the links to everything in the bio and everything, and obviously we will catch up anyway and see how the
Absolutely.
results. Mate, best of luck.
Cheers, Ash. Take care, buddy.